The Galactic Council chamber stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystal, its walls reflecting the light of 1,000 stars. Representatives from 47 species sat in perfect harmony, their translators humming softly as they discussed trade routes and cultural exchanges. At the center of it all, Ambassador Sarah Chen sat with her hands folded, her expression calm as stone. The human delegation remained silent on the matter of the Proxima mining rights, announced Councillor Vextar, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. The Altarian's voice carried the authority of someone who had never been challenged in 3 centuries of service. Sarah stood slowly, her movement causing a ripple of attention throughout the chamber. When she spoke, her voice was soft, almost gentle. The human delegation abstains from voting on matters concerning territories we are forbidden to enter. A collective murmur arose from the assembled delegates. The Zephyrians' crystalline forms chimed like wind bells, while the Drakmori's scales rustled with what might have been amusement. To them, humanity had become a curiosity, a once feared species now reduced to observers in their own galaxy. High Arbiter Moloch leaned forward on his floating platform, his massive bulk casting shadows across the floor. The Covenant leader's voice boomed through the chamber. The Terran species agreed to the pacification accords 60 years ago. Your people chose peace over conflict. Why do you now question our benevolent guidance? Sarah's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. We chose to honor our agreements, High Arbiter, just as we expect others to honor theirs. The weight of her words hung in the air like a gathering storm. Few in the chamber remembered the time before the Accords, when human warships had carved burning paths through space, when the mere mention of Earth's military had sent entire fleets retreating to the far corners of the galaxy. Those days seemed like ancient history now. Dr. Marcus Webb watched the proceedings from the human observation deck, his weathered hands gripping the railing. As the former admiral of the Third Fleet, he had been there when the Covenant first approached Earth with their ultimatum. Submit to the Galactic Council's authority, or face the combined might of the galaxy's oldest civilizations. Humanity had been strong then, but they were outnumbered 1,000 to 1. The choice had seemed obvious, even if it meant accepting restrictions that no other species faced. No human ships beyond the Sol system without explicit permission, no military installations outside Earth's immediate vicinity, no interference in galactic affairs. 60 years, Marcus whispered to his aide, Colonel Janet Rivers. 60 years of watching them carve up the galaxy while we sit in our corner like good little children. Janet's jaw tightened. The Covenant's been getting bolder lately. Did you see the trade restrictions they imposed on the Centauri colonies last month? Our own people, cut off from essential medical supplies because the Council deemed human expansion concerning. On the chamber floor, the debate continued. Ambassador Chen remained standing as species after species voiced their support for expanding the mining operations into the Proxima system, humanity's nearest stellar neighbor. The irony wasn't lost on anyone present. Humans were being excluded from decisions about their own cosmic backyard. The matter is settled, High Arbiter Moloch declared, his voice cutting through the chatter. The Altarian Consortium will oversee the Proxima mining operations. All trade routes through the system will be managed by the Galactic Commerce Authority. Sarah Chen nodded once, sharply. I request a formal statement be entered into the record. The human delegation notes, this decision violates the territorial sovereignty clauses of the original pacification accords. We reserve all rights under those agreements. A chill seemed to pass through the chamber. Councillor Vextar's 4 eyes narrowed. Are you threatening the Council's authority, Ambassador? I'm reading from a legal document, Councillor. Nothing more. High Arbiter Moloch's massive head turned toward the human delegation. The Covenant has shown remarkable patience with humanity's adjustment period. But our tolerance is not infinite. Your species was given peace. Do not mistake our generosity for weakness. Sarah Chen gathered her materials with deliberate precision. Nor should you mistake our compliance for surrender, High Arbiter. As the human delegation filed out of the chamber, Dr. Webb felt something stirring in his chest that he hadn't experienced in decades. It was the feeling he'd had as a young officer, standing on the bridge of the UES Defiance as it faced down a Drakmori battle fleet. It was the taste of lightning before the storm. That evening, Sarah Chen stood in her private quarters aboard the diplomatic station, staring out at the swirling nebula that housed the council chambers. Her hands were steady as she encrypted the message that would change everything. Priority transmission to Earth Command. She spoke into the secure communicator. Authorization Chen Alpha 77. Message begins. The Proxima situation has escalated beyond diplomatic resolution. The Covenant is no longer honoring the territorial provisions of the Pacification Accords. Recommend immediate implementation of Project Lazarus. The galaxy seems to have forgotten that humanity chose peace not because we were weak, but because we were strong enough to make that choice. It's time to remind them of the difference. She paused, thinking of her grandfather, who had fought in the last of the old wars before the accords were signed. He had told her once that peace was like a muscle. It grew stronger with exercise, but it could also atrophy if left unused for too long. Additional note. 60 years ago, we promised the galaxy we would be peaceful. We kept that promise. But we never promised we would be helpless. Message ends. Message. The transmission raced across space at faster-than-light speeds, carrying with it the weight of 6 decades of careful preparation. On Earth, in a facility buried beneath the Mogian wastes, machines that had been dormant for a lifetime began to hum with activity. Admiral Rebecca Stone stood in the command center of Project Lazarus, watching as holographic displays came online one by one. Around her, the greatest military minds of humanity worked at stations that had been maintained in perfect condition despite never being used. They had been waiting for this day, hoping it would never come, but prepared nonetheless. System status report, she called out. Shipyard 7 is online, came the first response. Automated construction protocols are active. Deep space monitoring stations are reporting all clear, added another technician. No Covenant surveillance detected in the outer system. Defensive platforms are charged and ready. Admiral Stone nodded, her expression grim but determined. Ladies and gentlemen, for 60 years we've been the galaxy's favored pets. Content to stay in our gilded cage, they've grown comfortable with the idea that humanity is no longer a threat. She turned to address the room directly. They're about to learn that the most dangerous predator is the one that's been pretending to sleep. The holographic display shifted, showing star charts and fleet positions throughout the galaxy. Red markers indicated Covenant strongholds, while blue showed the locations of human colonies that had been cut off from Earth by Council regulations. Our people have been scattered to the winds, isolated and vulnerable. Stone continued. The Covenant counted on our protective instincts keeping us docile. They were right. Up to a point. But they made one critical miscalculation. She gestured to the display, where new markers were appearing in amber. Hidden supply caches, dormant defense platforms, and sleeper agents who had been living normal lives in human colonies throughout the galaxy. They assumed we would prepare for defense. They never imagined we would prepare for war. Dr. Webb's shuttle touched down at the Lazarus facility just as the first of the new ships began emerging from their hidden construction yards. The sight took his breath away. These weren't the bulky, practical vessels that humanity had used in the old conflicts. These ships were works of art, sleek and deadly, incorporating 60 years of technological advancement and tactical innovation. Beautiful, aren't they? Admiral Stone greeted him at the landing pad. We've had 6 decades to think about our mistakes, to refine our approach. The galaxy remembers human ships as lumbering giants that relied on brute force. They're not expecting this. The new ships moved like dancers, their hulls shifting and adapting as advanced metamaterials responded to changing conditions. Weapon systems that appeared to be simple hull plating unfolded into devastating arrays of firepower. Defensive screens that could render a ship nearly invisible to most sensors. How many? Webb asked, his voice hushed with awe. Enough, Stone replied. More than enough. As if summoned by their conversation, Sarah Chen's shuttle appeared on the horizon. The ambassador had left the council station immediately after sending her message, claiming urgent business on Earth. The Covenant had let her go without question, another sign of their complacency. When Sarah emerged from her shuttle, her diplomatic robes had been replaced by the uniform of a human defense force admiral. The sight sent a shiver through the assembled personnel. Sarah Chen wasn't just a diplomat. She was the daughter of Admiral Chen Wei, hero of the Battle of Titan and architect of humanity's most sophisticated military strategies. "Status report," she demanded as she strode toward the command center. "All systems are operational," Admiral Stone replied. "Fleet deployment can begin within 6 hours. Diplomatic channels? All human colonies have been discreetly contacted. Our people are ready to evacuate or defend as the situation requires." Sarah nodded, then turned to address the assembled officers. "The Covenant expects us to protest through proper channels. They expect diplomatic notes and formal complaints. They expect us to be civilized." Her voice hardened. "They're about to discover that civilization is a choice we make every day. And today, we're choosing something different." The command center erupted into controlled activity as officers rushed to their stations. Orders flowed through quantum-encrypted channels to sleeper cells throughout the galaxy. On distant worlds, humans who had lived as merchants and farmers and teachers revealed their true purpose, activating hidden weapon caches and defense networks that had been decades in the making. The Covenant had spent 60 years teaching the galaxy that humanity was harmless. They were about to learn that the most dangerous human is one who has been underestimated for too long. As the first wave of ships launched from their hidden yards, Sarah Chen stood before the main display, watching as the galaxy's balance of power prepared to shift once again. The age of enforced peace was ending, and the age of human revenge was about to begin. The first sign that something had changed came from the Kepler station, a massive trading hub 3 sectors from Earth. Commander Thaxril of the Covenant Security Force was reviewing routine patrol reports when his communications officer rushed into his quarters, mandibles clicking with anxiety. "Commander, we've lost contact with the monitoring station in the Sol system," the young Drakmori reported. "Complete blackout. No distress signal, no indication of technical failure." Thaxril set down his datapad, feeling the first stirring of unease. "When was the last confirmed transmission?" 18 hours ago, sir. Standard patrol report. Nothing unusual. Send a probe to investigate. And contact the nearest Covenant fleet. I want a security sweep of the entire sector." What Thaxril didn't know was that the monitoring station hadn't been destroyed. It had been carefully dismantled by human engineering teams. Its crew either recruited or quietly relocated to comfortable exile on a distant moon. The station's final transmission had been a carefully crafted loop of normal operations, designed to buy precious hours while humanity prepared for war. In the depths of space, Admiral Rebecca Stone stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, the flagship of humanity's hidden fleet. Around her, dozens of ships moved in perfect formation, their stealth systems rendering them invisible to most sensors. These weren't the same humans who had meekly accepted the pacification accords 6 decades ago. "Status report," she commanded. "Stealth systems are holding steady," reported Commander Martinez from the tactical station. "Enemy sensors are showing clear space. Phase 1 targets? All Covenant monitoring stations in human space have been neutralized. Phase 2 is ready to commence on your order." Stone nodded, her expression grim but satisfied. "Begin Phase 2. Show them what humanity has become." Experience. The first target was the Altarian mining operation in the Proxima system. The alien fleet had arrived only days earlier, their massive extraction vessels already beginning to strip mine the asteroid fields that had been designated as human territory under the original accords. Captain Elena Vasquez commanded the lead assault group, 5 ships that dropped out of stealth directly above the mining fleet. The Altarians had perhaps 30 seconds to register the human vessels before the attack began. It wasn't a battle, it was a demonstration. The human ships moved like nothing the galaxy had seen before. Their hulls shifted and flowed, adapting to incoming fire while their weapons systems unleashed precision strikes that disabled rather than destroyed. Within minutes, the entire Altarian fleet was drifting helplessly, their crews unharmed but their ships completely neutralized. Captain Vasquez opened a communication channel to the lead mining vessel. "Altarian fleet, this is Captain Vasquez of the Human Defense Force. You are in violation of the territorial sovereignty clauses of the pacification accords. You have 12 hours to evacuate this system." Any vessels remaining after that time will be escorted to the nearest Covenant station. The response came in heavily accented Galactic Standard. This is Mining Director Krelvan. By what authority do you claim this system? The Council awarded these rights to our consortium. By the authority of beings who never surrendered their right to defend their own homes, Vasquez replied calmly. The Council may have forgotten the original terms of our agreement. But we remember every word. You have 11 hours and 58 minutes. News of the Proxima incident reached the Galactic Council within hours, sending shockwaves through the crystalline chambers. High Arbiter Moloch convened an emergency session, his massive bulk radiating fury as he addressed the assembled delegates. The humans have attacked a legitimate mining operation, he roared. This unprovoked aggression cannot be tolerated. Councillor Vextar's 4 eyes blinked rapidly. My intelligence sources report that no shots were fired. High Arbiter. The human vessels used some form of advanced disabling technology. No casualties were reported. The method is irrelevant. Moloch slammed his fist against his platform. They dared to challenge our authority. Where is the human ambassador? I want her brought before this council immediately. The chamber fell silent as a new voice spoke from the diplomatic gallery. I'm here, High Arbiter. All heads turned to see Admiral Sarah Chen standing in the section usually reserved for the human delegation. But she was no longer wearing the robes of a diplomat. Her uniform bore the insignia of the Human Defense Force, and her expression held none of the diplomatic courtesy that had characterized her previous appearances. Admiral, Moloch said the title like a curse. So the humans reveal their true nature at last. You pretend to be diplomats while plotting military action. We revealed nothing that wasn't already known to those who cared to look, Sarah replied calmly. The pacification accords specifically preserved humanity's right to defend our territorial sovereignty. The Council chose to ignore those provisions. You attacked a civilian mining operation. We responded to an illegal occupation of human territory. The Altarian fleet has been released unharmed, exactly as the accords require for conflicts involving territorial disputes. Councillor Vextar leaned forward. Admiral, what exactly do your people want? Sarah Chen's smile was sharp as a blade. We want what we were promised 60 years ago, Councillor. Peaceful coexistence based on mutual respect and adherence to legal agreements. The Council has chosen to interpret our compliance as weakness and our patience as submission. That interpretation ends today. She activated a holographic display that filled the chamber with star charts. Red indicators showed the locations of every human colony that had been cut off from Earth by Council regulations, while amber markers revealed the positions of Covenant fleets throughout the galaxy. For 60 years, you have systematically isolated our colonies, restricted our trade, and occupied our territorial space. Sarah continued. You have done this because you believed we would accept any humiliation rather than return to war. You were wrong. The display shifted, showing new contacts appearing throughout human space. Ships that hadn't been there an hour ago were now clearly visible on long-range sensors. The Human Defense Force is implementing Operation Homecoming, Sarah announced. Every human colony that wishes to return to Earth's protection is being offered immediate evacuation or military support. Every piece of territory legally granted to humanity under the Accords is being reclaimed. High Arbiter Moloch's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. You would risk galactic war for a handful of mining rights? We would risk everything for the principle that agreements mean something, Sarah replied. The galaxy has enjoyed 60 years of peace because humanity chose to honor its commitments. If that peace is to continue, all parties must honor theirs. The chamber erupted into chaos as delegates from dozens of species began shouting in their native languages. Through it all, Sarah Chen stood perfectly still, her expression never changing. Dr. Marcus Webb watched the proceedings from the observation deck, feeling a mixture of pride and terror. He remembered the young woman who had once served as a junior officer on his flagship, brilliant but untested. That woman was gone, replaced by someone who radiated the same cold competence that had made human admirals legends throughout the galaxy. Sir, Colonel Rivers whispered beside him. Fleet Command reports that Phase 3 is ready to commence. Webb nodded grimly. Phase 3 would be the real test. Phase 2 had been about reclaiming human territory, demonstrating that the Defense Force could strike anywhere in the galaxy without warning. Phase 3 would show the Covenant exactly how far humanity was willing to go to protect its own. The first Phase 3 target was the Drakmori Research Station at Wolf 359, where human scientists had been conducting archaeological research until the Council declared the system off-limits to all species except their own chosen experts. The research team had been studying ruins left by an ancient civilization, work that might hold the key to understanding how the galaxy's oldest species had achieved faster-than-light travel. When the human research team was expelled, their notes and equipment were confiscated. 6 months later, the Drakmori announced breakthrough discoveries in ancient technology, claiming full credit for work that had been started by human scientists. Commander Lisa Park led the strike force that materialized around the research station like ghosts becoming solid. Her ships were smaller than those used at Proxima, but they moved with even greater precision. Drakmori Station. This is Commander Park of the Human Defense Force. You are in possession of stolen research materials and illegally obtained scientific data. Surrender those materials immediately, or we will take them. The station's response was swift and hostile. Defensive platforms activated, sending streams of plasma fire toward the human vessels. The attack might have been devastating against the ships the galaxy remembered from 60 years ago. Against these new vessels, it was like throwing rocks at shadows. The human ships simply weren't there when the shots arrived, their positions shifting with impossible speed and precision. Return fire was surgical in its accuracy, disabling weapon systems without harming personnel, quarters, or research facilities. Within minutes, the station was defenseless. Human boarding teams teleported directly into the research areas, moving with the practiced efficiency of those who had studied the station's layout for months. They recovered not only the stolen human research but also complete copies of everything the Drakmori had built upon that foundation. Station Commander. Park's voice echoed through the facility's communication systems. Your people have 60 years of illegally obtained human research in your databases. We'll be taking all of it back now. Consider this payment for 6 decades of scientific theft. The boarding teams worked quickly, their portable computers interfacing directly with the station's networks. 60 years of research that had been built upon human foundations was copied and transmitted to the waiting fleet before the station's crew could react. As the human ships prepared to withdraw, Commander Park sent one final message. Station Commander. Inform your superiors that this is what happens when you steal from humanity, and claim our discoveries as your own. We have long memories, and we never forget a debt. News of the Wolf 359 raid spread through the galaxy like wildfire. The Covenant's response was swift and predictable. A massive fleet was dispatched to Earth to demand humanity's immediate surrender. Admiral Rebecca Stone watched their approach from the bridge of the Retribution, now openly visible in Earth's orbital space, alongside hundreds of other human vessels. The Covenant fleet was impressive, nearly 1,000 ships representing the combined might of a dozen species. Incoming transmission from the Covenant fleet, reported the communications officer. Put it through. High Arbiter Moloch's massive form filled the main screen, his expression twisted with rage. Admiral Stone, I presume, I am here to accept your unconditional surrender. You will stand down your fleet immediately and submit to Council authority. Stone's response was calm and measured. High Arbiter, I'm afraid you're operating under a misunderstanding. We're not surrendering. We're renegotiating. There will be no negotiations. Your species violated the pacification accords. Actually, we enforced them. The accords guaranteed humanity territorial sovereignty and equal treatment in galactic affairs. The Council has been violating those agreements for decades. Moloch leaned forward, his bulk filling the screen. Enough word games. You will surrender now, or we will take your world by force. Admiral Stone smiled. And for a moment, she looked exactly like the predator that humanity had evolved to be. You're welcome to try, High Arbiter. But before you do, you should know that this conversation is being broadcast to every inhabited world in the galaxy. The entire civilized universe is about to see what happens when someone threatens humanity in its own star system. She gestured to the tactical display. You have 1,000 ships, Arbiter. Impressive. We have 1,200. And unlike your fleet, ours were designed specifically to fight in this system. The display showed the true scope of humanity's preparation. Hidden platforms throughout the Sol system came online, their energy signatures blazing to life on every sensor in the system. Asteroid bases that had been disguised as mining operations revealed their true nature as heavily fortified gun platforms. The outer planets themselves bristled with defensive installations that had been built over decades of careful preparation. You see, High Arbiter, we've had 60 years to prepare for this moment. 60 years to study your tactics, to analyze your technology, to plan for every possible scenario. You thought you were keeping us weak. Actually, you were giving us time to become stronger than you could possibly imagine. The Covenant fleet held its position, their commanders suddenly realizing that what they had thought would be an easy conquest had become something far more dangerous. Last chance, Admiral, Moloch growled. Surrender now, or face the consequences. Rebecca Stone's smile never wavered. High Arbiter, for 60 years you've lived in a galaxy where humanity chose peace. Now you get to discover what it looks like when we choose something else. The first shot came from a Drakmori heavy cruiser, its captain apparently deciding that the human admiral was bluffing. The plasma bolt screamed across space toward the Retribution's hull. It never arrived. The shot simply vanished, absorbed by defensive systems that the Covenant had never seen before. For a moment, there was perfect silence in space. Then humanity showed the galaxy exactly what 60 years of enforced peace had really taught them. The Battle of Sol lasted exactly 17 minutes. When it was over, the Covenant fleet hung motionless in space, their ships intact but completely helpless. Every weapon system had been precisely disabled, every engine carefully neutralized, every communication array systematically shut down. Not a single being had died, but 1,000 warships had been rendered as harmless as drifting debris. Admiral Rebecca Stone stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching as human engineering teams began boarding the disabled vessels. Her expression was calm, almost peaceful, like someone who had just finished a long and difficult task. Status report, she called out. All Covenant vessels are secure, replied Commander Martinez. No casualties reported on either side. Their crews are unharmed but confined to quarters. Excellent. Begin Phase 4. Phase 4 was the part that would truly change everything. For 60 years, the Covenant had ruled the galaxy through technological superiority and the threat of overwhelming force. They had convinced every species that resistance was futile because they possessed weapons and defenses that others could not match. Now, humanity was about to demonstrate that technological superiority could flow in the other direction. High Arbiter Moloch found himself sitting in his command chair, staring at screens that no longer responded to his commands. Around him, his bridge crew worked frantically to restore their systems, their efforts hampered by technology they couldn't understand or counter. The main screen flickered to life, showing Admiral Stone's calm face. High Arbiter, your fleet will be returned to you within the next few hours. However, there have been some modifications. What kind of modifications? Moloch's voice was tight with rage and fear. Educational ones. Every ship in your fleet has been equipped with new communication systems that cannot be disabled or removed. These systems will allow them to receive broadcasts from anywhere in the galaxy, including from human colonies that have been cut off from outside contact for decades. Stone's smile was pleasant, almost friendly. Your crews are about to learn what life has been like for humans under Council rule. They're going to hear from the families separated by your travel restrictions, the scientists whose research was stolen, the traders whose livelihoods were destroyed by your arbitrary regulations. The Admiral gestured, and the screen split to show images from human colonies throughout the galaxy. Faces appeared, young and old, representing dozens of worlds that had been isolated by Council decree. Meet Maria Santos, Stone said, indicating an elderly woman with tired eyes. She's been trying to visit her grandchildren on Earth for 12 years. The Council keeps denying her travel permits because her colony was classified as potentially unstable for having too many humans in positions of authority. Another face appeared. This one belonging to a middle-aged man with calloused hands. Thomas Chen. No relation to our admiral. He's a farmer on Kepler 442b. The Council's trade restrictions mean he can't export his crops to other human colonies, but he's required to sell them at below-market prices to Covenant food distributors. More faces followed, each one telling a story of casual oppression and systematic discrimination. The Covenant had convinced the galaxy that humans were treated fairly, that the restrictions were necessary for galactic peace. The truth was very different. Your crews will have time to listen to these stories during their journey home. Stone continued. They'll learn what your benevolent guidance actually looks like to those who live under it. Some of them might even start to understand why we chose to act. Moloch leaned forward in his chair, his massive hands gripping the armrests. You cannot seriously believe that a few sob stories will change anything. The Council will never accept human dominance. We don't want dominance, High Arbiter. We want equality. The difference between us is that we're strong enough to demand it. The screen changed again, this time showing a tactical display of the entire galaxy. Human ships were appearing in systems throughout Covenant space, not as invaders, but as liberators. Colonies that had been cut off from Earth for generations were being reunited with their homeworld. Research stations that had been seized were being reclaimed. Trade routes that had been monopolized by Covenant species were being opened to free commerce. This is what the galaxy looks like when the pacification accords are actually honored, Stone explained. Humans defending human territory, protecting human citizens, and exercising the same rights that every other species takes for granted. Dr. Marcus Webb materialized on the bridge of the Retribution, his image transmitted from the surface of Earth. The old admiral's face showed a mixture of pride and sorrow as he surveyed the disabled Covenant fleet. Admiral Stone, I'm receiving reports from across the galaxy. Operation Homecoming is proceeding ahead of schedule. 17 colonies have requested immediate evacuation. 43 have asked for military support, and 6 have declared independence from Council authority. Any resistance? Minimal. Most local Covenant forces are standing down rather than fight. Apparently, word of what happened here is spreading faster than we expected. Stone nodded. The battle in Sol system had been broadcast live to every inhabited world in the galaxy. Within hours, the entire civilized universe had watched 1,000 Covenant warships disabled without firing a single effective shot. The myth of Covenant invincibility had died in those 17 minutes. What about civilian casualties? She asked. None reported. Our people are following the rules of engagement exactly as written. Disable, don't destroy. Protect, don't punish. We're not becoming the monsters they said we were. That had been the crucial decision. The one that would determine whether humanity's return to power was seen as liberation or conquest. Every ship captain, every Marine squad leader, every pilot had been given the same instructions. Use minimum necessary force, protect non-combatants, and remember that the goal was justice, not revenge. Admiral Sarah Chen joined the conversation from the Galactic Council chambers, where she had remained throughout the battle. Her diplomatic robes had been replaced by a full admiral's uniform, but her voice retained the calm professionalism that had served her well in negotiations. The Council is requesting an immediate ceasefire and emergency negotiations, she reported. Councillor Vextar is practically begging me to arrange a meeting with our leadership. And your response? Stone asked. I told them that humanity would be happy to negotiate, but only after certain preconditions are met. All human colonies must be given the option to return to Earth's protection. All stolen research and technology must be returned. All discriminatory trade practices must end immediately. Sarah's expression hardened. And there's one more condition. The Council must formally acknowledge that the pacification accords were violated by Covenant actions, not human ones. High Arbiter Moloch, still listening to the conversation through his hijacked communication systems, felt something cold settle in his stomach. The humans weren't acting like conquerors or terrorists. They were acting like a sovereign government reclaiming what was rightfully theirs. Admiral Stone, he called out, his voice carrying less authority than before. Surely we can discuss this rationally. There's no need for this level of demonstration. Stone turned her attention back to him. High Arbiter. For 60 years your people have had the luxury of making decisions about humanity without consulting humans. You've restricted our movement, seized our territory, and stolen our work. You've done this because you believed we would accept any humiliation rather than fight. She paused, letting her words sink in. Today you learned that our patience has limits. Tomorrow, you'll learn what happens when those limits are exceeded. The tactical display updated, showing new fleet movements throughout the galaxy. Human ships weren't just defending their own territory anymore, they were moving to support other species that had been oppressed by the Covenant's authoritarian rule. The Andromedan refugees who were denied settlement rights because they might dilute galactic culture are being offered homes in human space, Stone announced. The vegan scientists who were expelled from the Academic Council for questioning Covenant research practices are being invited to join human institutions. More markers appeared on the display. The Centaurian trade fleets that were banned from major shipping routes are being offered protection and escort services. The mining guilds that were forced to sell their operations to Covenant corporations are being given the chance to buy them back. Moloch stared at the display in growing horror. You're trying to destabilize the entire galactic order. We're trying to create a galactic order based on justice rather than fear. Stone replied calmly. The difference is that justice doesn't require everyone else to be weak for it to work. Captain Elena Vasquez appeared on the tactical screen, her ship now positioned near the Altarian homeworld. Admiral, the Altarian government is requesting direct negotiations. They want to discuss returning the Proxima mining rights to human control. Approved. What are their terms? Full compensation for their investment in the operation, plus a 20-year trade agreement for refined metals. Apparently they're more interested in making money than making war. Stone smiled. Capitalism finds a way. Approve the deal, but make sure they understand that any future territorial claims will be resolved through proper legal channels. Similar reports were coming in from across the galaxy. Species that had chafed under Covenant rule were reaching out to humanity, eager to explore alternatives to the current power structure. The humans weren't demanding submission or tribute, they were offering partnership based on mutual benefit. Dr. Webb's image reappeared, this time showing him standing in the rebuilt command center of Luna Station. Admiral, I'm receiving requests for military assistance from 14 species. Apparently the news that someone successfully stood up to the Covenant has been very encouraging to others who felt oppressed. Our response? We're offering technical assistance and defensive support to any species facing Covenant retaliation, but we're making it clear that we're not building an empire. Anyone who wants our help has to commit to the same principles we follow. Minimum necessary force, protection of non-combatants, and respect for legitimate territorial sovereignty. The old admiral's expression grew serious. There's something else, Rebecca. Intelligence reports suggest that not all Covenant species supported their aggressive policies. The Zephyrians and the Vegan Federation apparently filed formal protests that were suppressed by the Inner Council. Stone nodded thoughtfully. Contact them directly. Open diplomatic channels and see if they're interested in discussing alternatives to the current system. High Arbiter Moloch watched these developments with growing desperation. The carefully constructed alliance that had maintained Covenant power for centuries was beginning to fracture. Species that had been forced into submission were suddenly exploring other options. Admiral Stone, he called out, his voice now carrying a note of pleading. What will it take for you to stop this? What do you really want? Rebecca Stone turned to face him fully, her expression serious but not unkind. High Arbiter, we want what we've wanted from the beginning. We want to live in peace with our neighbors, to trade freely, to explore the galaxy, and to protect our people from harm. We want the same things that every species wants. She gestured toward the tactical display. The difference is that we're strong enough to insist on having those things. For 60 years, you've taught the galaxy that might makes right. Today, we're using that lesson to make things right. The communication ended, leaving Moloch alone with his thoughts and his disabled fleet. Around him, His crew members were beginning to listen to the human broadcasts, their expressions changing as they heard stories that contradicted everything they had been told about humanity's treatment under Council rule. In the depths of space, the tide of galactic politics was shifting in ways that hadn't been seen for centuries. The age of Covenant dominance was ending, not in a cataclysm of destruction, but in a carefully orchestrated demonstration of what justice looked like when it had the power to enforce itself. Admiral Rebecca Stone stood on her bridge, watching as the stars themselves seemed to shift around new centers of power. The galaxy was about to discover that the most dangerous enemy isn't the one who threatens to destroy you. It's the one who offers you something better than what you have, and has the strength to make that offer real. Humanity had spent 60 years learning how to be peaceful. Now they were teaching the galaxy what peace actually meant when it came from a position of strength rather than weakness. The lesson was just beginning.